wanted to do another video today wrapping up more things that I've read in 2017, so these are the next 6 installments of that. If you haven't seen any of my wrap-ups before, just wanted to let you know I don't have a reading goal this year. I'm just doing wrap-ups as soon as I finish a handful of books. I'm not really in the mood to read. I wouldn't really call it a slump, but I mean, if you want to put a terminology onto it, you might call it a slump. Long story short, I've just been reading whenever I feel like it, and a lot of these books are for my classes, so perks being an English major, you read even when you don't want to. So I'm just gonna go ahead and jump into it. Like I said, this first book I have is for school. So for my fantasy literature class, we read Prince Caspian by C.S. Lewis. This is the 4th book in the Narnia Chronicles. I was intending on reading the entire series before I began this, but I did not end up getting to that. I only read the first one, and I mentioned that in a previous video. But I read this one for class, even though it was out of order, and I still really enjoyed it. I love the Pevensie children. Why is my hair stuck to it? Aslan is always just a wonderful character. I liked it. I'm not really impressed by C.S. Lewis's world and his writing. I think there were a little too many characters in here, and that kind of bogged it down for me, but it was a good story, so I gave that one 4 stars. The next book I read was for my German class, and it was called Ermina by Barbara Yellen. I'm also Yellen. This was a book that we read because we're talking about the 1940s era, and this book begins in the 1930s, and it talks about this girl who comes from Germany to England. She meets a guy there. He's a black man studying at Oxford, which is like unconventional, and so she creates a friendship with him and then ends up having to go back to Germany, and it talks about her time dealing with stereotypes and racial tension, but then also being involved in Nazi Germany and how she sort of transforms as a German. It was interesting. I think I'd have to reread it because again, it was for class and we read it throughout like 3 months, so I think I'd have to reread it in its entirety to develop an opinion about it, especially since we read a lot of it in German. It was also hard to grasp. I think that there's a good root here of a good book had I read it faster and in English. There was some missing link for me that made me not like Ermina for reasons I can't spoil. I just kept putting myself in her shoes and I would have done everything differently, and it was so frustrating. But it was a gorgeous story. The pages were illustrated so nicely. It had really good messages, I feel, so I did end up giving it 3 stars on Goodreads. Maybe if I had read it in English that could be 4 or 5 stars, but in German, the German edition is 3 stars for me. Next, I read Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. This one was also for class, even though this is one of my favorite books, so I was like, sure, let's read it all day. I'm here for that. So this is the first book in the Miss Peregrine trilogy. I've read all of them, and I was rereading this one for the first time. Surprisingly, I enjoyed this a lot reading it for class because our teacher, he's such a nutball, but he's a genius. So he was pointing out little things that he was like, yeah, and fantasy does this and this and this and this, and I was like, whatever. But then we read this and it literally fits every single thing that he's been talking about, and I was mind blown. Coming at this as a 15-year-old reader back when I first read it versus coming at this from a college-aged perspective in a college class, it was interesting both times, loved it both times, still give it 5 stars, adore this story, and now I want to reread the entire trilogy, which I can't because I don't have the other 2, so I guess that's my good insulation against rereading an entire series when I should be starting all the things I haven't yet. Next, I finished, and I've been reading this book since January, so this is longly awaited. I finished Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. I've been reading this since January, not because it's slow, not because I don't like it, not because it's hard to get into, but I did not want this to end. Every time I would pick this up, I would read a couple chapters of it and then get to a point that made me just like seize up and not be able to read anymore because I was experiencing so many emotions. So I just decided, you know what, I'm not gonna rush this, I'm not gonna force this, this is gonna be all natural. And then I read it at my own pace, which took 4 months, but you know, it was fine. I enjoyed it, but I need to say 2 things. 1, how dare she? And 2, something made me hesitate giving this 5 stars. I don't know if it's because maybe I would have enjoyed it more if I'd read it all together, or if there was something missing for me. Parts of it did begin to drag, and I realized the first book, Six of Crows, I loved every single character except Matthias. I was like, he can choke. I felt so much for them, and this one, it started getting very biased. Like, I began to anticipate some people's chapters more than others, which didn't happen for me in the first book, and I don't know if that was me just naturally developing more feelings for different characters, or if the book just had a different vibe in the chapters. I don't know. It might have not been me, it might have been the book. I couldn't figure it out, but it did kind of drag the book down for me a little bit in that way. But other than that, gorgeous. Frickin' Kez and Anaj. Kez and Inej. Who am I? Fake fan. Kaz and Inej are like two of my all-time new favorite characters, and usually whenever I read books that are like fantasy series or series with a big cast of characters or they have more than one POV, I'm like obsessed with the male character. Even in things that are first person like Shatter Me, I'm like, listen, if I had to save Juliet or Warner, I would save Warner. And so it was so strange for me to read this. I like Inej more than I like Kaz. So loving a female character more than a male character I think is just mind-boggling to me, and maybe my own personal character growth. My baby, I love her so much. So I really enjoyed this read. Again, took it slow, I let it simmer. It went in real nice. That's what she said. I think one more thing I want to compliment Lee Berdugo on is the way that she constructs these heists and how little tiny details, like just the fact that she can come up with these heists that are so specific and they have little tiny gears that go together. She just is a massive genius. Like, I don't know how she constructs these. Six of Crows and this blow my mind just because of the planning that goes into what they do, and it's genius and I could never do it, so I applaud her on that because I'm too stupid for that. Like, every time she would pull something I'd be like, shook. Well done on her part for that one. The next book I read was The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz. This book is a literary fiction, I think you'd classify it as. It takes place in the Dominican Republic and sort of America, and it talks about this guy named Oscar Wilde. He is sort of a loner. The entire book focuses on how like he can never get girls and he loves sci-fi fantasies, kind of a nerd, and it talks about how that makes him sort of an outcast in his society. So this book goes into his life as well as his family members, detailing the things that they've gone through as Dominicans. I listened to this on audiobook because Lin-Manuel Miranda narrated the audiobook. So thank you, Penguin, for sending me the audiobook for this. It was a lot of fun. I will just say that listening to anything that comes out of Lin-Manuel Miranda's mouth, I'm just like, what's the eyeglasses magnifying glass emoji? That was me. Like, everything he was saying, I was like, tell me more. So if Lin-Manuel Miranda voiced every audiobook, I would never get distracted listening to them because it's I love him. The actual content of this book though, I enjoyed it. I gave this 4 stars. Again, I took this one slow. I think it was good. I enjoyed the storyline. At first I was hesitant because it talks about Oscar Wilde and I was really impressed with him. Like, I liked his character, I thought he was interesting and I could relate to him. But then it brought in this huge backstory about his grandmother and it went on and on and on, and I was like, what is the purpose of this? And then the more characters it started to outline and the more we expanded the story, the more it clicked for me. So there was a brief lull where I was like, why? But it made sense in the end and I actually did enjoy that part of it. It's a wonderful book. The storytelling is great. It's told from a narrator who isn't in the WoW family but is sort of a companion to Oscar, and he has his own opinions that he inserts into the story, but a lot of it is just chronicalizing the life of this family and this person, and it was so interesting, so sad in the end. I feel like it's gonna stick with me. Like, as much as I feel like it's just like an okay 4-star book, I can already feel it lingering, you know? And I was looking at Goodreads reviews and a lot of people had increased their ratings afterwards saying this book just stuck with me, and I can feel it doing that for me. It's interesting. Usually I'm not a fan of stories that are woven with other languages. Like, this has a lot of Spanish in it, but once again, I guess hearing it from Lin-Manuel Miranda, I was like, tell me anything. I know exactly what you just said. I thought it was so well done and I would read it again someday. Honestly, that's what I put in my Goodreads review. I said if I read this in a couple years down the line in a physical format, I would love to see what else I get out of it, just because it's ready to be unpacked. Like, there's a lot there and there's a lot to get out of it. And the last book that I read, honestly, didn't need this. Didn't have to have it happen, but here we are. For some stupid random reason, I decided to reread Unravel Me. So I have my paperback copies with me here at school. This, I've said forever, is my favorite one of the trilogy. And by the way, if you're new here, Shatter Me is my everything. Shatter Me is my favorite book of all time. It literally is like my teenage childhood, has helped me get through dark times book. I reread it. These all signify parts or details that I had forgotten or hadn't noticed before, just to like keep it fresh in the mind, you know? So these were all just instances that I learned something new, which is weird. When I reread something, I'm like, I thought I knew this back and forth, but I guess I don't. Let's discuss. I think the main thing I have to say is the last time I reread this was in 2014. after Ignite Me came out, I just went, you know what, no, we're rereading it again because I need the whole experience. And I remember the last time I read this book, I'm gonna sound so pathetic, I legitimately started sobbing reading this book because I felt like I had to take breaks reading it, and it was impacting me so harshly, how much I loved these characters and how much they meant to me. I kid you not, was sobbing at this book because it was so overwhelming with my feelings. And when I reread it this time, there was a very distinct lack of that. I've never been able to reread a Shatter Me book straight-faced. You know, usually when I reread them, I'm very much emotional about it and I love these characters and I'm giggling and I'm like, oh my god, Juliet first. But this time rereading it felt so normal. Like I was just, and I'm sad about it because I think I might be losing that part of me that fangirls about things. I was rereading it, like even chapter 62, I was straight-faced just turning pages and it was like the most surreal experience. My camera died, but I was on a roll, so I'm gonna finish this up on my phone. Sorry for the change in quality. Yeah, Unravel Me. It was the most surreal reading experience I've had with this series thus far because there was a distinct lack of me fangirling about it, which I don't know if it's because this book isn't my favorite anymore, if I just read it after I finished Crooked Kingdom and there were some lingering feelings there that were unresolved, or if I'm stressed in a weird state at college. I felt so normal reading this. Do you understand why I'm so concerned for myself? It's because I've never before felt so lukewarm about it in my entire 5 years having read the series. So I don't think I'm moving on because I still really enjoy it. I still cannot get these characters out of my head. They're still my babies. I don't know why I had it's so weird to think about. Like, I was actually giving myself anxiety after I finished it because I was like, this just read like okay to me. Like, this has never felt okay. There were certain scenes where I was reading Warner's dialogue and I remember fully how I would not be able to handle it. Like, I'd have to put the book down and take deep breaths because it impacted me so much. But there were scenes now that I'm reading and I'm sitting there reading it like, that doesn't seem like realistic dialogue for a person. I hate it. And I'm just like, why am I just now starting to like peek my head out over this? I hope it's not an end to a phase. I hope I haven't just roasted myself by moving on from a series like this, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm going home for Easter break tomorrow, actually, but by the time you're watching this, probably I will have already come back from Easter break. I anticipate I'm gonna start Ignite Me because I read this in 2 days, which is faster than I've read anything in the past month. I think I deserve to carry out the rest of the series just to give myself some closure. I'll see if I get fangirly again. Maybe it's because I don't enjoy this book as much as I used to, but yeah, it was so weird. It's so weird. Like, I hate talking about it. But yeah, I reread Unravel Me. I kept it at 5 stars just because I couldn't discount the way I felt about it for this long. I do think it's a really great story. I'm not bored for a single second of this. I love Juliet with all my heart, and anyone who says that she's weak in this book can fight me. Put on your location, I'm on my way. I relate to it so much, it just punches me in the gut over and over. Don't know why I had such a normal reaction to it this time around, but maybe it was a fluke. We'll see.